Gonzo Bankers, Tony DeSanctis back, continuing our journey to 2030. Let's talk about the next pillar, data-driven. The old quote that always resonates with me on this one that I think about is the old Ziglar quote, which is, if you aim for nothing, you'll hit it every time. And you know, the interesting reality is we have plenty of data. We don't have a single client out there that's lacking for data. What they're lacking is actionable insights. So I've asked Eric Weichert and a couple of the leaders in the team here to join us to talk through how to turn our data and be data-driven and turn that into actionable insights. So Eric, thanks for joining us.
Tony, thank you very much, and excited to be here with the team. We live and breathe our clients' data daily here at Cornerstone, and excited to talk about some of the insights that we found out there in the industry. So wanted to spend a little time up front here kind of talking about what our challenges as bankers are in working through data. Obviously, we have some of the richest data out there when it comes to payments data for our clients. When it comes to, I know we all have hundreds of reports we run on an even daily basis. And I would just say that as we go through and try to help our clients, the one thing that we point to is, let's really, to Tony's point, let's look at what actionable data that we have and how can we drive our performance, our strategy, our growth based upon that data. So excited to kind of talk with Ann and Mike today really about that. And Ann, I want to start with you. As we talk, I know you lead a lot of our strategy engagements, and a lot of banks will talk a lot about strategy, but then when it comes to measures and figuring out, are we achieving our goals and objectives, we really don't have too much there. So what do you see in Ann around how can we use data in our strategic planning and our strategic engagements for maybe looking out 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, well, thanks, Eric. You know, there's actually kind of the input side of data, and then it's the output side of data. And on the input side, as you said, there's so much data within the institution. Sometimes it's a little overwhelming, and a lot of times it's messy because given all the systems and mergers that happened in the past. So don't let that be an impediment to moving forward with whatever pieces of data you can get would be the first piece of advice, kind of take one bite out of the elephant at a time, because a lot of institutions get frozen with that. But on the strategic side, looking inwardly is really important, but even probably more importantly is using data to understand your market, what's happening in the economy, what's happening in your target segment, how are consumers reacting to the market right now. And, at the moment, data is probably the only thing you control. The uncertainty index, yes, that's an index that's actually measured by the Federal Reserve, is at one of its highest point and rising given what's happening around tariffs and the impact that that will have on consumers' savings and credit, et cetera. We have to take all of that, and our clients have started to harness that, not only in strategic forecasting, but strategic optionality.
Well, that's great insight. I think, as you look into some of our clients out there, we're big fans of client examples here at Cornerstone, and I can think of a couple great examples. And do you have any examples that you would share with the audience just around how banks are using, or banks and credit unions using data to really drive some of this strategy?
Yeah, there's a couple of them, but one that comes to mind is an organization that was looking at trying to get into the small business space. And it was a new market for them, a new target area, and really thought they had a sweet spot with some of their branches in a larger metropolitan area. When we took a step back, looked at the market data of businesses in the area, types of businesses in the area, concentrations around their branches, it ended up that a couple of the branches didn't actually support that strategy. So we ended up saving them quite a bit of money because they ended up going into a different direction based on the demographics and the market trends within that environment.
That's a great example how we can use not only our data, but just industry data and data that's readily available out there from call reports, et cetera. So I love that example. Thanks, Ann. Mike, I want to go to you for a second because I know you lead a lot of our efficiency and performance engagements here at Cornerstone. One of the things that we found out there in the industry is there aren't a lot of success measures when it comes to business lines, and how do we know that we're successful in some of the initiatives we're going after? Maybe it's a branch rationalization or some sort of contact center or commercial lending type initiative. How do we know if we're successful, or how do we know if we're moving the needle when it comes to projects out there? So what advice would you give to our clients around using data to drive performance?
Yeah, thanks, Eric. And I think the first thing for me is that it's very common for our banks and credit unions to have high-level, C-suite level metrics that are largely based in call report and general financials that are out there, which is a great starting point. Don't get me wrong. But to your point, we support line of business level, metrics that are going to track and show ROI for the time expended on certain projects, right? And so it's really getting to the core and the meat around business case and opportunity capture so that at the end of whether it's a 12, 18, or 24-month initiative, we have pretty quantifiable evidence to say, hey, we've moved the needle towards our strategic goal on this particular item. And so like I said, we're fully supportive of each functional area of a bank, understanding, it doesn't need to be an exhaustive list of 25 measures, but pick 2 or 3 that we think are really going to be drivers for the organization, and manage towards those. We believe that you can't manage what you don't measure, right? So we encourage our clients to say, let's pick a starting point and begin to track some of these things that are going to show success at that line level.
You can't manage what you don't measure. I love it. I think I remember a poster in one of the CFO's room that had that up that I was at. But yeah, thank you very much for that, Mike. Any client examples you want to share with the audience here around on performance?
Yeah, I mean, we've worked with several financial institutions in recent years that have been really trying to understand, revenue growth and loan growth is not what it used to be, right, coming out of the last few years. And so we really need to focus on operating leverage, reducing unit cost as we grow to achieve scale. And I have one bank that comes to mind that just overall had opportunity through several areas. And what they were able to do is leveraging some of the approach that I referenced around line of business specific ownership is put some KPIs in place. And what that did was hold leaders accountable to a certain performance level. So every 6 months, every 12 months, they're looking at data and then pivoting and adjusting over time. And I think that's really important takeaway for our bankers is to say, look, we may say we're going to measure something today, but as we get new information, as the market changes, as competitive dynamics shift, if we need to pivot and we're not moving the needle like we expected, that's okay. Right. And to say, look, we're going to go a different direction. We're going to set a new target, a new measure for success. That could be a best practice as well.
Love it. Well, good stuff. Well, speaking of growth, I think, Ann, one of the things that our clients, as you look out there, are really struggling around is just growth, right? Whether it being deposit growth or getting more loan applications in the door, you name it. We've got a lot of data out there. What can we do with the data that we have, that rich data in payments, that rich data in really understanding our client base to drive growth?
Yeah, I mean, you have to take all of it, but again, kind of hunting back to the strategy question of focus, target markets, and then taking that data to do exactly what you just described, Eric, is to put it all together. And there's this plethora of data out there, but how to truly understand that market you're going after, whether it's the consumer space or in the business space, and then take the data to make sure you're creating that experience that is relevant for them and one that solves their problem. And so things like, no one wants to get inundated with marketing messages that just say, hey, you need a loan when, I just bought a car and you're sending me this. You don't know anything about me and you've got all of my money sitting with you. So how do we use just the simple data within institutions to create an opportunity from a messaging standpoint? Simple as that, to the experience of creating actually those transaction experiences based on preferences and knowledge about how I transacted in the past. If I've only used a digital channel, don't send me anything to walk into the branch, that kind of thing. So again, it's mining the data. Don't let the overwhelming nature of the data and the messiness of the data that you have within your institution prevent you from doing the simple things that can go a long way with that customer base.
I think it's great. I can think of a client example that we were working with, actually Mike and I, and they were trying to figure out why they had such a big retention problem. And so when they went out and looked at some of their data, it was very clear to them that, wow, they were losing all these checking accounts, but there were a group of their customers where they were losing the checking accounts. And it was very clear, it was very correlated to a point in time. If you looked at the data that said, hey, these attributes of this data happened within 3 months of them leaving us, and all of a sudden got out in front of that, marketed to those folks before they left, figured out why they were leaving, and fixed the problem with the product, right? In that case, it was a product problem where they were just in the wrong product. They had options, but they were in the wrong product at the particular client. So love it. One other thing, Mike, I wanted to circle back to you with, and it's really around how do we use point products? And, we talk about data warehouse, data lake, all of these things, but we don't necessarily talk about our specific departments like loan origination, or what's helping our underwriters, or fraud, what's helping our fraud department. And I believe that we use data, we call it service providers, not data necessarily, but I don't want to lose sight of the fact that we're buying these products and services out there, and they're giving us an edge because of data. Could you maybe talk a little bit about what you're seeing out there around, I'll call them point systems that are really driving change leveraging data?
Yeah, and it's a good question, right? Because I think it's a big world out there, right? Especially in the Wild West of AI and machine learning. And I think the big takeaway is there's not going to be an arrival point when it comes to our data strategy, right? There are point solutions that are tailored to specific use cases, like deeper machine learning in terms of mining of credit bureaus for loan decisions. There's different sets of machine learning and automation that can be applied to back office operations tasks, or sort of generative AI within the contact center in terms of agentive AI, and how do we serve customer bases and member bases more effectively. So I think for me, the takeaway for executives is to have a pretty strong business case and a problem that you're trying to solve. Because I think a lot of what we're seeing in the market these days is a solution in search of a problem. And while on the bleeding edge of technology, maybe that's appropriate in some cases, but for the vast majority of financial institutions that aren't on the bleeding edge, that don't have multi-billion-dollar technology budgets, they need to be very precise and very specific around where they're going to adopt these technologies. So for us, pick 3 to 5 things, 5 core problems that these solutions can be applied to, and then really identify what's going to move the needle, so that you're going to market with a new technology solution very intentionally with an end goal and an end result in mind. And as I mentioned before, don't forget to measure that success.
I would just say, as we look at our providers, this is not one solution, right? This is not, I'm going to build a data warehouse and therefore I've got all my data figured out, right? This is, as you're looking at takeaways here, the first thing is it's not going to be in one system, right? There are going to be multiple systems. Some of those are going to leverage things, to Mike's point, around peer data. Some of them are going to leverage call report data, to Ann's point, around geography and market pricing and those types of things. Some of them are going to use proprietary data. And we believe here at Cornerstone that there's no one solution that fits all. We need to have a variety of solutions that make that work. So I think that's number one. I think number two is, and Ann, you had talked about this earlier, I think it's a great point. We are going to have to make decisions based upon imperfect data. And that is a very scary thing for some folks, right? And so I would just say, we got to learn to go ahead and make those decisions based upon imperfect data, learn from if there are mistakes made from those moving forward. But data is not always perfect, you guys. And so I think as we look at a second key takeaway, it's really making those decisions based upon imperfect data. I think using benchmarking data, Mike, to your point, benchmarking our banks, our credit unions based upon other folks out there. I think that's a really key thing. Looking at peers, looking at even other industries, by the way, in how we're doing things, rethinking our strategy, and using data to measure that strategy and those initiatives going forward.
Can I add just one thing, Eric, to add? I'm sorry, can I just add one thing to add, Eric, because I think the piece that's also missing is watching and mining the customer member data in a way that you haven't done in the past, because there's so much richness in the transaction behavior, to Mike's example, or I don't know, Eric, if it was your example around when they were leaving the institution, but bringing a non-bank, non-credit union lens to the data can be really powerful. And that's a challenge for all of us who grew up in the industry.
Sorry, Tony, I'm going to say one more thing because Ann reminded me of one other thing. The other takeaway, I think, is getting, and we hadn't talked about this yet, but I think it's an important point, getting the data in front of your front line real time. Right? That's the important thing, right? So we talk a lot about all this data, but if we don't have it at decision time, at the time I've got a customer in front of me, or I've got to make a decision as a teller that says this check is fraudulent, or the system does it automatically real time, the ship has sailed, right? So I would just say that's one other thing as you guys are looking to be successful in data driven, is as much as you can get that to the front line in a real-time nature.
So here's what I heard. I think Eric did a great job of summarizing. Be okay with imperfect data. Take action to get to those insights. I think Ann said it early. You're going to eat the elephant one bite at a time. You're going to get things from multiple sources. You got to be flexible. You also, as Mike said, pivot. You're going to have to pivot your metrics from time to time and make sure you're looking at the right thing, especially as priorities change. So there's a lot to data driven. Obviously, we do a lot of work in this space, and Eric and Mike and Ann are great in helping folks leverage this. So if you think we can help you out, we would love to talk to you about it. But data driven is going to be, maybe I would argue, the key pillar for the journey to 2030. So if you want to talk more about it, we'd love to talk to you about it, and we'll see you soon.